There was a time when television felt simpler, quieter, almost like a window into the perfect American dream. A time when families gathered around a glowing black and white screen, watching life unfold in a little suburban home where problems were small, lessons were gentle, and everything seemed to make sense by the end of the day. Leave It to Beaver wasn't just a show, it was a feeling. It was childhood innocence captured forever. A world where Ward had all the answers, June held everything together, and Beaver somehow always found trouble waiting just around the corner. But behind those warm smiles, behind that picture-perfect family, reality told a very different story. Because when the cameras stopped rolling and the laughter faded, many of the lives behind Leave It to Beaver took turns no one could have predicted. Some found new paths, some struggled quietly, and others faced moments so shocking they would forever change how we remember them. And here's the part most people never knew. Stick with me until the end, because one of these beloved stars went through a real-life story so unexpected, so far from the world of Mayfield, that it still feels almost impossible to believe. You may think you know these actors, but what happened after the show ended might completely change the way you see them. When Leave It to Beaver first aired in 1957, it arrived at a moment when America was searching for stability, for identity, for something to believe in. And somehow, this simple story about a young boy and his family became exactly that. The Cleavers weren't just characters. They became a blueprint for what millions of families hoped life could be. Ward Cleaver was the calm, thoughtful father every household admired. June Cleaver, with her pearls and quiet strength, became the symbol of grace and motherhood. And at the center of it all was Beaver. Curious, mischievous, and deeply human. A child navigating the confusing world of growing up. For 6 unforgettable seasons, audiences didn't just watch this family. They felt like part of it. Week after week, viewers saw pieces of themselves reflected in those stories. The awkward moments, the small mistakes, the lessons learned the hard way. It was comforting, familiar, timeless. But what made Leave It to Beaver truly special wasn't just the writing or the charm. It was the people behind the roles. A group of actors who brought these characters to life so naturally, so convincingly, that they became inseparable from the parts they played. And maybe that's where the story begins to shift. Because while the Cleavers lived in a world where everything eventually worked out, the actors who portrayed them didn't always have that same luxury. Life after fame can be unpredictable, especially when you grow up in front of millions. And then suddenly, it's gone. Some of them tried to hold on to that spotlight. Some walked away from it completely. And some found themselves facing battles no one on the outside could see. So as we take this journey back through time, remember this. The world of Leave It to Beaver may have been simple, but the lives behind it were anything but. Jerry Mathers was, in many ways, the heart of Leave It to Beaver. As Theodore Beaver Cleaver, he wasn't just acting. He was living out the childhood that millions of viewers recognized in themselves. His natural innocence, his awkward curiosity, and his ability to stumble into trouble made him one of the most relatable child stars of his time. And unlike many young actors, Jerry didn't come from a place of chaos or instability. His early fame was steady, even joyful. But growing up in front of America came with its own quiet challenges. When the show ended in 1963, Jerry faced something many child stars struggle with: the sudden disappearance of the spotlight. The world that once revolved around him simply moved on. Instead of chasing fame, he made a surprising decision. He stepped away. He chose a different path, one that few fans expected. Jerry Mathers joined the United States Air Force Reserve, embracing discipline and structure far removed from Hollywood sets. It was a grounded choice, almost symbolic of his desire to live a normal life. For a while, he did just that. College, business ventures, and a life outside the industry became his focus. But even with that stability, the shadow of Beaver never fully disappeared. Typecasting lingered, quietly shaping how the world saw him. No matter where he went, he was still that little boy from television. And yet, unlike so many others, Jerry found a way to return, on his own terms. Years later, he reconnected with his past through stage performances and nostalgic revivals. Instead of running from Beaver, he embraced him. And in doing so, he became one of the rare child stars who found peace with fame rather than being defined or destroyed by it. His story isn't filled with scandal or tragedy, but perhaps that's what makes it so remarkable. In a world where so many child actors fall apart, Jerry Mathers simply endured. Tony Dow, on the other hand, carried a very different weight behind his easy smile. As Wally Cleaver, he was the older brother everyone looked up to. Confident, kind, and effortlessly cool, he seemed to have it all. But behind that calm exterior, there was a struggle few could see. After Leave It to Beaver ended, Tony's path didn't follow the typical arc of a fading teen idol. Instead, he reinvented himself. He moved behind the camera, working as a director and producer in television. It was a smart transition, one that allowed him to stay connected to the industry without being trapped by his past role. But success doesn't always protect you from what's happening inside. For years, Tony Dow battled clinical depression, a silent, persistent struggle that contrasted sharply with the wholesome image audiences remembered. He spoke openly about it later in life, shedding light on a reality many never associate with someone who once represented the ideal American teenager. There's something deeply human about that contrast. The boy who seemed to have everything together, quietly fighting a battle no one could see. And yet, Tony didn't stop searching for meaning. In his later years, he discovered a new passion: sculpture. His work, often abstract and reflective, revealed a different side of him: thoughtful, introspective, and deeply expressive. It was as if he had found a new language, one that allowed him to process the complexities of his life. But even as he found that artistic peace, time had its own plans. Tony Dow's passing marked the end of an era for many fans. It wasn't just the loss of an actor. It was the loss of a piece of childhood. The big brother who always seemed to know what to do, suddenly gone. And in that moment, the illusion of Mayfield faded just a little more. Barbara Billingsley was, for millions of viewers, the definition of the perfect mother. As June Cleaver, she embodied grace, warmth, and quiet strength. Always composed, always understanding, she became an icon of an era that valued stability and tradition. But Barbara's life, like so many others, was far more layered than the role she played. Before Leave It to Beaver, she had already experienced the ups and downs of Hollywood. Small roles, uncertain opportunities, and the constant pressure to succeed in an unforgiving industry. When she finally found her place as June Cleaver, it seemed like everything had aligned. Yet that success came with a hidden cost. She became so closely associated with the role of the perfect mother that it was nearly impossible to escape. Typecasting followed her, limiting the opportunities that came her way after the show ended. For a time, it seemed as though Hollywood only saw her as one thing, and nothing more. But Barbara wasn't finished. In one of the most unexpected reinventions of her career, she appeared in the comedy film Airplane, delivering a performance that shocked audiences who had only ever seen her as June Cleaver. It was bold, surprising, and undeniably memorable. A reminder that there was always more beneath the surface. Her personal life, too, was marked by resilience. Through marriages, loss, and the quiet challenges of life beyond fame, she carried herself with the same strength that defined her on screen. And perhaps that's the most powerful part of her story. Because while June Cleaver may have been an ideal, Barbara Billingsley was real. A woman who navigated fame, limitation, and reinvention, and still managed to leave behind a legacy that feels timeless. But as we move forward, the stories become more complicated. Hugh Beaumont was the steady voice of reason in a world that always seemed just a little uncertain. As Ward Cleaver, he represented the ideal father, calm, thoughtful, and always ready with the right words at the right time. To millions of viewers, he wasn't just a character. He was a standard, the kind of man many admired, and many tried to emulate. But off-screen, Hugh Beaumont was living a life that was far more complex than the one audiences saw each week. Long before Leave It to Beaver, he had already built a career in Hollywood, appearing in films and television throughout the 1940s and early 1950s. Yet acting was never the only calling in his life. Beneath the surface, there was another identity quietly shaping who he was, one rooted in faith. Hugh Beaumont was also an ordained Methodist minister, and for much of his life, he existed between two very different worlds. On one side, the structured, often superficial environment of Hollywood. On the other, the deeply personal and spiritual commitment of ministry. It wasn't a contradiction he spoke about often, but it was one that defined him. As Leave It to Beaver came to an end, that inner divide became harder to ignore. While many actors chased the next role, Hugh stepped away. Not dramatically, not with scandal or headlines, but quietly. He chose to dedicate more of his time to his faith, serving communities, and focusing on something far removed from fame. But leaving behind a role like Ward Cleaver wasn't as simple as walking away. For years, he had embodied the perfect father on screen, and in many ways, audiences expected him to be that same man in real life. That expectation lingered, creating a subtle tension between who he was and who people believed him to be. His later years were marked by that quiet complexity. Less visible, less celebrated, but deeply meaningful in ways that didn't need an audience. Hugh Beaumont's story isn't one of chaos or controversy, but of duality, of a man who lived between two identities and ultimately chose the one that felt most true to himself. Ken Osmond, however, lived a life that felt almost like the opposite of the character he portrayed. As Eddie Haskell, he was the ultimate troublemaker, charming on the surface, but always hiding something just beneath it. He was the kid parents warned their children about, yet somehow, audiences loved him for it. That role became unforgettable, but it also became something else, a label. After Leave It to Beaver ended, Ken Osmond found himself trapped by the very character that made him famous. Casting directors didn't see Ken, they saw Eddie. And in Hollywood, that kind of typecasting can quietly close doors. So he made a decision that no one saw coming. He left acting behind entirely and joined the Los Angeles Police Department. It was a transformation so dramatic, it almost sounds like fiction. The mischievous troublemaker from television, now enforcing the law on real streets. For years, he served as an officer, building a life far removed from studio lights and scripted dialogue. But real life doesn't follow a script. In 1980, during a routine pursuit of a suspected car thief, Ken Osmond was shot, hit multiple times in the line of duty. It was a moment that could have ended everything. For a brief time, it was even believed that he might not survive. But he did. And in that survival, his story took on a new meaning. No longer just the actor who played Eddie Haskell, he became something else entirely. A man who faced real danger, real consequences, far beyond anything seen on television. Even after returning to public life in later years, reprising his role in revivals, that dual identity remained. To fans, he was still Eddie. But in reality, he had lived a life far more intense than the character ever could. And then there's Rusty Stevens, whose story may be the quietest, yet in many ways the most mysterious. As Larry Mondello, Beaver's loyal and often unlucky friend, Rusty was a familiar face in the early seasons of the show. He brought a certain charm to the role, a kind of awkward sincerity that made him instantly recognizable. But then, he was gone. Unlike many child actors who struggled to stay in the spotlight, Rusty Stevens simply stepped away. No scandal, no dramatic exit, just a quiet disappearance from Hollywood. For years, fans wondered what had happened. Why would a young actor, already part of such a beloved show, choose to leave it all behind? The answer wasn't dramatic, but it was deeply human. Rusty's family made the decision to move away from the entertainment industry, prioritizing a more normal life over the pressures of fame. And just like that, the world of television was replaced with something far more ordinary. School, family, a life without cameras. It's a path that many child stars never get the chance to take. But even so, there's something almost haunting about his story. Because while others stayed in the public eye, evolving, struggling, reinventing themselves, Rusty became a question mark. A piece of the show frozen in time, while the man himself moved on. Years later, he would briefly reconnect with fans, offering glimpses into the life he chose. But by then, the mystery had already become part of his legacy. And maybe that's what makes his story so powerful. Not every ending is filled with drama. Sometimes, the most unexpected choice is simply to walk away. But as we move closer to the final chapter, the stories take an even more surprising turn. Frank Bank may not have been the star of Leave It to Beaver, but as Lumpy Rutherford, he was unforgettable. The slightly awkward, often clueless friend, always lingering just on the edge of the story, yet somehow leaving a lasting impression. He represented a certain kind of childhood we all recognized. The kid who didn't quite fit in, but was always there. And in many ways, that role would follow him long after the cameras stopped rolling. Because when the show ended, Frank Bank faced a harsh reality that so many actors quietly endure. Hollywood had no place for him anymore. He wasn't Beaver. He wasn't Wally. He wasn't the kind of leading man studios were looking for. And worse, he was too recognizable as Lumpy. That single role, which once brought him success, now became a barrier. Casting directors couldn't see past it. Doors closed, one after another. And for a time, it seemed like his story in entertainment was simply over. But what makes Frank Bank's journey so remarkable is what he chose to do next. Instead of fighting to stay in an industry that had already moved on, he walked away completely. Not gradually, not reluctantly, but decisively. He stepped into a world that couldn't have been more different from television sets and scripted lines. He became a stockbroker. It sounds simple, almost ordinary. But the transformation was anything but. Frank didn't just find a new job. He built an entirely new identity. In the high-pressure world of finance, there were no cameras, no applause, no familiar faces recognizing him as lumpy. Just numbers, risk, and opportunity. And somehow, he thrived. Over time, he achieved a level of financial success that few would have ever predicted. The same man who once struggled to escape the shadow of a fictional character was now navigating markets, building wealth, and proving that his story didn't end when Hollywood turned away. But that kind of reinvention doesn't come without its own challenges. Because even as he succeeded in this new world, the past never fully disappeared. To millions of fans, he was still lumpy. That image, frozen in black and white, followed him everywhere. It's a strange kind of dual existence, living one life in reality while the world remembers another version of you entirely. And yet, Frank Bank embraced it in his own way. Later in life, he would reconnect with his past, attending events, sharing stories, even writing about his experiences. Not as someone trapped by his former role, but as someone who had moved beyond it. There's something powerful in that, because out of all the stories tied to Leave It to Beaver, Frank's may be the most unexpected. Not because of scandal or tragedy, but because of transformation. A complete departure from everything that once defined him. From a child actor shaped by typecasting, to a man who rebuilt his life in a completely different world. And in the end, that might be the most surprising journey of all. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. When you think back to Leave It to Beaver, who stands out the most in your memory? Was it Beaver, with his innocent curiosity and endless misadventures? Wally, the older brother who always seemed to have things figured out? Or maybe Eddie Haskell, the smooth-talking troublemaker who kept everyone guessing? Take a moment and tell me in the comments. Because for so many of us, these characters weren't just part of a show. They were part of growing up. And now, as we look back after all these years, something becomes very clear. Time has a way of changing everything. The world of Leave It to Beaver was carefully crafted. A place where problems were solved in 30 minutes, where families stayed together, and where life, no matter how complicated, always found its way back to something simple and reassuring. But real life doesn't follow a script. The children we watched grow up on screen grew up for real. The parents who seemed so certain faced their own uncertainties. Behind every smile, every lesson, every perfectly timed ending, there were lives unfolding that were far more complicated than anyone could see. Some of these actors found peace. Some found purpose in completely different paths. And some carried struggles that remained hidden behind the image we all believed in. That's what makes this story so powerful. Because Leave It to Beaver wasn't just a television show. It was a snapshot of an era. A moment in time when the world felt a little more predictable, a little more hopeful. And even though that version of life may never exist again, the feeling it gave us still does. We remember where we were when we watched it, who we watched it with, the comfort it brought at the end of a long day. And maybe that's why, even now, it still matters. Because behind the black and white images, behind the laughter and lessons, there were real people, living real lives, facing real challenges. And in the end, that's what connects us to them the most. If this story brought back memories for you, take a second to like the video and share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy revisiting these classic shows and discovering what really happened behind the scenes, don't forget to subscribe. There are so many more stories waiting to be told. And you might be surprised what we uncover next.